this anti-terrorism coalition, the international coalition. So I'm not sure what is exactly that he's expecting them to do else, because they have done all what they can do, despite my skepticism about this international coalition and in dealing with terrorism, the effectiveness of this approach. I think there are a lot of holes in this approach that doesn't make it strong in order to deal with the issue.
To a certain extent, that message and the one that he's going to deliver about expecting leaders in the Arab world to stand up and spend money on their own defence, spend more money on their own defence. These are all things they've heard many times before.
Yeah, I don't think that there is going to be anything new, honestly, because it's going to be in line, the way I see it, with the traditional message or traditional approach from the White House, is that separating between Islam and the Muslim extremist or the terrorist. But the fact of the matter, no matter how you put it, this is going to be still as more of an Islamic thing, which is, I think, there is where, because extremism is not something restricted to Islam or to the Muslims. There is extremism everywhere, and that's where an opportunity for the Muslim leaders is to convey this message. And not only this, but also I think it's an opportunity for them is to hold him accountable, for what all the statements that he made, and to try to see a genuinely different rhetoric that's now he's starting, and to try to amend and to revise all what he said in the past, which is, I think, it's the time for them is to say this clearly, because otherwise they would just come and, for him, to hear him lecturing them, and then go and nothing changes. So there is an opportunity and should be seized.
Okay, Ibrahim, stay with us. Okay. We'll speak to you again within the hour. Let's go live now to Riyadh and speak with our Washington editor, James Bayes, who's travelling with the President as part of the press corps. This highly anticipated speech then, James, we have, as we've been hearing, have some excerpts that have been released. We know to a certain extent what the President is going to say.
Yeah, we know some of the language. In fact, we've known for some time what some of the language was likely to be, because there have been various leaks, although we were told in the past that the leaks were from different drafts that had been prepared for the President for his discussion, and they actually merged different drafts from different authors. We know one of the authors, in fact, is Stephen Miller, who's a senior White House advisor, who was one of the architects of the language of those various travel bans. Well, they're putting that behind them for now. That's certainly not something that's not really mentioned in this speech, which is addressed to the Islamic world. I think it's pretty fair to say that the main message of this speech is about ISIL and fighting ISIL. It has the words, "America is a sovereign nation. Our first priority is always the safety and security of our citizens," and makes it clear it's not a battle between different faiths, it's a battle between good and evil. But it adds, as you watch those ongoing operations which are taking place involving US troops in Syria, working alongside Kurdish and Arab forces, the SDF, and on the other side of the border in Iraq around Mosul, where you have Iraqi and Kurdish and Peshmerga forces involved in trying to retake Mosul with the help of the US, and particularly US air power. The speech is going to also say the nations of the Middle East cannot wait for American power to crush this enemy for them. And we've already heard the Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, say here, this isn't just a war on the battlefield. That is part of it, defeating ISIL and defeating those cities, retaking that territory, so they no longer have that foothold. But it's also about the foothold they may have in educational institutions, that they may have on the internet. It's that battle as well as the battlefield, conventional battle.
This isn't a message, though, that Arab leaders haven't heard before, James.
It's not a message they haven't heard before, and I have to say this is quite carefully thought out, measured language. The closest you get to some of the stuff that Donald Trump has said before is when he condemns Islamist extremism. Well, that's very different from the phrase that he repeatedly used on the campaign trail. He said that Hillary Clinton and President Obama had refused to say what the enemy was, and he used to say in those rallies, radical Islamic terrorism, and the crowd used to chant along. Well, that phrase is not in this speech. And it's pretty clear the America First president, who introduced those travel bans, is now pivoting in a slightly different direction. So definitely a reset for American policy is what the White House says towards the world, but I think also a reset for Donald Trump in his language towards the Islamic world.
All right, James, many thanks. We'll speak to you again, I'm sure, with